search Tor, which is relatively unique. It's not unique. There's other ones out that have come out recently, but it was sort of the first one. And there is a great DuckDuckGo app for Android, but that now has lost its entire Tor functionality actually. So because of Google closing in, and we will talk about that more in a minute. So Tor is great that it's kind of everywhere. It's pretty easily accessible. The software to install, like we mentioned about cross-platform, yes, it's on BSD, Linux, OS X, Windows. You probably wouldn't want to run it on Windows, but it's available for just about anything except for iOS. And even that, I've heard recently that there is a browser that will allow for it to work on iOS, but I can't confirm that. So the alternative to Tor, because there are more than one of these internets, or internet layers, is I2P. Now I2P doesn't have any government funding, doesn't seem to have a whole lot of funding at all, and so there's not a whole lot of development. I mean, it's active, but there's not a huge development team. It's not a name. How many people here have even heard of I2P? Okay, so it's not like, because I'm sure everybody's heard of Tor, probably because of the Silk Road, right? Or whatever reason, your own personal research. What's that?
I'm a nerd.
Cheers. I'm the king of the nerds. I'm with you. All right. No, I really was.
All hail the golden stallion.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Some of you may know me as the golden stallion of the tech world in particular. Yeah. There you go. So anyway. I2P is great. It does the same thing that Tor does, as far as being an anonymity layer, meaning that that IP address issue is solved, similar, a little bit different from how it works on VPNs, but it's definitely something I recommend using and looking into, but just keep in mind that I2P is not as solidly developed as Tor is, and it's buggy, and I would question how secure. Even though it is an encryption layer as well, I would question how secure necessarily I2P is. Yes, it is open source. Everything I've mentioned so far, by the way, is open source. That's a great question, because if it's not open source, how do you know it's really doing what it's doing? Okay, you don't. Right, you don't. Now, there's an open source fallacy. I'll touch on that real fast. There's an open source fallacy in the thinking that, oh, well, it's open source, it must be secure. That's not true. Why? Because what do we mention? Heartbleed, right? That's open source, OpenSSL. But that's the problem, is that you only had like 2 developers working on that. I can touch on 4. Was it 4? Yeah, whichever. Anyway, I think there's like 2 developers for OpenSSL. It's pretty sad, but fortunately that's getting fixed because the team that works on, I mentioned BSD, there's a distribution called OpenBSD, and these guys are the best coders on the planet, and they are actually going to be developing their own OpenSSL, and so hopefully this kind of stuff won't happen. Yeah, LibreSSL, yeah, there you go. Hopefully that won't be happening. So got a really intelligent audience here, I love it. Yeah. So I2P, look into it. It's the same thing where it has its own servers. It's a meta layer on top of the internet, and you can check it out. A lot of options. There's chat options that exist within that, and it doesn't have to be. It's not peer-to-peer, so it works just like the big bad internet, to where you just connect and you go. Okay, so there's advantages to that. I recognize that, but moving on from Tor and I2P, I want to talk about some of the issues of using Tor and I2P, and the issue comes down to, in my opinion, one thing. About a year ago, there was in Ireland, I believe it was based in Ireland, there was a Tor server farm. Okay, this means the servers that host all the wonderful things you use on Tor, like the Silk Road, or the Hidden Wiki, or whatever website you care to use. And not that it was hosting those, but it was certainly hosting plenty of other services on Tor. It is called Freedom Hosting. Okay, aptly named, because Tor does free people. It really does. Actually, Tor saves thousands of lives a day from being used in various countries where freedom of speech is a real problem or freedom of action is a real problem, and people are allowed to do activism anonymously through it. So it's a great thing, but because it can be so government toppling, and Tor can certainly help with that. We saw that in Turkey recently, where they were, Tor was the only way to get any kind of information out, and the government was terrified of information getting out because they were afraid for their own existence. Okay, the FBI, that's the U.S., essentially went to Ireland, whatever group it ended up being a part of, but the information, the implications came from the FBI, and took out freedom hosting. So a huge chunk of Tor is now gone, okay? And that's what happens when you rely on servers, okay? It's a centralizing effect, okay? It's servers, and what I mean by centralizing is just another word, and this is what I'd like people to start thinking of it as. Centralizing is synonymous with central point of failure, okay? And so servers in and of themselves may be a huge issue, but without servers, you have no internet. So what do we do about that, okay? How many people here want the internet that we have right now? You can say yes, it's okay. If you want to say yes, it's all right. I won't scream at you. So servers, that centralization of the internet. Now, a lot of people want to talk about, and this is where I'm getting into more of the digital evolution that I want to discuss. Servers are a very new creation. It's in the grand scheme of things, okay? You have, they were thought of in the 60s, right? But they're pretty new in their implementation, because before the internet, and that's really where servers, yeah, they had servers in workplaces and all that, that's why I say it's been around since the 60s, but as far as servers that send information to the average everyday person, not to call you, all of you, average or everyday, right now, is a new development. So what exactly, how did people, talk to each other before these servers existed? Yes, they did. And I will get into that in a moment. Servers as a central point of failure are a central point of failure simply because everything that you access, everything that you do, you go on YouTube, you take your pick of whatever internet action you take, it exists on a server somewhere. That server gets taken out, it's gone, forever, no more. Does anyone think that's a good idea, that's possible?
No.
Yeah, okay. It's not a good idea. But without it, you can't have the internet. And a lot of people would say that this event right here, Porcfest, that's going on, would not be happening if we didn't have the internet. Freedom would never have spread, right? I think that's fair that a lot of people would say that without this big, because that's what the internet really did. The internet freed up knowledge. It's important to keep in mind, a lot of people I don't think they really realize this, but in the 90s when the internet came into its prominence in 94 through 96, whatever, and then of course it went gangbusters in 2003, it really wasn't about business. It wasn't about transactions, it wasn't about banking, it wasn't about all the things that really most everybody uses today. It was just about getting information out there. You can watch videos. You can go to YouTube, you can use that internet, and you can look at some history and see that the internet, as it was advertised back then, was all about finding that exact sentence in War and Peace that you were looking for. Okay, that's what the internet was. That was the conception that all of the biggest companies in the world had. You can watch old interviews with Bill Gates, and it'll tell you that's exactly what he was shooting for. He was a little more visionary in other ways, but he was. That was what he was expecting, and a lot of people like to say all these guys back then were wrong. And it wasn't until much, much later that the banks moved in, and whatever other different industry, again, like doing a marketplace. Like the internet really just wasn't designed to be a marketplace, and you can see that when you watch really old videos back from Stanford when they were designing the internet as we know it. We're talking like the 1960s again. So keep that in mind, that was the original purpose of that. But now it's grown to be so much more. Now it's become, the digital world has very much become as important and as intertwined, in your own life as the meat space world, as the world that you see right now. But my point with the idea of, that it's just information, and that it's really great that information gets out there. I think that's all fine and dandy, but it is so much more now, okay? And so you can say, well, we wouldn't have all this if we didn't have the internet, and that's fine. But at the same time, the internet is so much more. You're picking and choosing what's great about it. And so after you pick and choose what's so great about the internet, I think the question should be asked, is there something else that could do that? Is there something else that could solve that problem that doesn't have the central point of failure of servers? And this is where I want to get into the digital evolution, because I think that can happen. But one of the first things that one of the first humps I feel we have to get over in this digital evolution, to where we can get away from, this internet that has issues. And it's not just being a central point of failure. I mean, how many people, since the NSA started grabbing all your data, how many people just want one internet that's really easy to access? Okay, cool. Nobody does. Awesome. So I can finish my talk now. That's great. If we're all in agreement that we want a ton of internets that people would have to, that whatever agencies would have to search through, I think that's a very good thing. So let me skip around just a little bit, because I did want to mention that before the internet, that's exactly what we had. We had what was called BBS, Bulletin Board Systems. Does anybody remember BBSes? Born in 1990 and remember BBSes. You are a nerd, sir. All right. You're that too. Yeah, all right. You ran one.
Yeah,
there
I
you
ran
go.
one too.
BBSes were, I love these guys. BBSes were the internet of its day. And they ran from, like the mid-'80s, maybe even early '80s, all the way up into just about the aughts. And BBSes were very much a decentralized internet. It was a bunch of internets all over the place, okay, and allowed for local communication, which is a fantastic thing. It allowed for the transmission of information. It was incredibly slow because it was using phone lines, okay, standard phone lines. Everybody remembers the beep that it used to be when you'd use a modem, a classic modem. Oh, it's terrible. Okay. But BBSes themselves, after you got connected, was not a terrible thing. They were amazing to use, and you could play games on them, just about anything, albeit not at the speeds, and certainly you didn't do YouTube on them. You could do everything you do on the internet right now with a BBS system. So keep this in mind as we're talking about this. What we have now with one big central internet, okay, is the ability to really, I think, catalog. It's far too easy to catalog everything we do. It's far too, and again, it is that central point of failure. Back then with a BBS, if a BBS goes down, you could just connect to another BBS. Most, especially metropolitan areas, like New York City, would have 30 BBSs. I mean, there'd be tons of them, and you could just switch around. You could just go to the next one. So if something fell down, you go to the next. It wasn't a big deal. And also, of course, at the time, a lot of storing of information was done locally, which today wouldn't be a problem because, hard drives are cheap. I mean, you can get terabytes upon terabytes upon terabytes for sometimes even less than $100. Okay? So what I want you to consider with the digital evolution is the idea that we have alternative technologies that we could use, and that we could actually relocalize the internet to what it was before using new technologies that we have as far as available speeds. And then we don't have this central point of failure, and we also don't have, this huge overarching area where companies like Google can pretty much figure out just about anything about you. Now, caveat with Google knowing everything about you, I think sometimes they fail pretty hard. They've never pushed an ad to me that actually sold me something that I wanted. But I think we're seeing not in the digital space so much, but in meat space, I think we're seeing a lot of people starting to, how many people are enjoying Porcfest right now? Okay, everybody's enjoying Porcfest. How nice is it to be with actual people?
Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty great. I mean, does pork, would you rather be on Facebook than be at Porcfest? Anyone? No, okay. I think we all inherently realize that the way the internet actually connects us is pretty superficial and maybe even antithetical to our own happiness. Okay, now I can take questions on that, and you can ask me about that sort of stuff in a little bit. And I think a movement, part of my opinion of what a digital evolution needs to head towards is relocalizing everything. The internet, take your pick, and just getting people together where they are, and not being a replacement for our communication, but just being an enhancement. Okay, just making our lives better. I mean, I think there's a lot of people, no doubt about it, the way the internet lets you do business is phenomenal. I mean, it's really incredible. You know, the businesses that you can create online with practically no money, and then you use services like Bitcoin, and you know, they just free everything up. That's awesome. But I think you can create perhaps an even better business on a local level, or you know, maybe we can figure out some way to somehow interconnect them a little bit, but either way, to relocalize everything as much as possible. I mentioned RetroShare earlier. It's friend to friend. Who else do you want to talk to? You know, when you're on the internet. I mean, you're trying to reach out. Well, friend to friend still lets you do friend of friends. And so I think we're really missing something in, you know, my point is that I think a lot of people are getting very, very desensitized to the internet, and the internet, again, is a central point of failure to where we're going to lose entire aspects of what we do, and we're counting on it far too much, putting far too much faith in something that is incredibly fragile. And the internet really is. An alternative I want to bring up that the other host that was supposed to be here was going to talk about is MadeSafe, okay? And MadeSafe, if you're looking for a hybrid of what I'm talking about, is that we still have this nice big bad internet, but then we also have that decentralization. MadeSafe is really the answer to that. Now, how many people know what MadeSafe is? Okay, MadeSafe is an idea, it's a software platform, okay? Kind of similar to RetroShare, not exactly. How many people know what Freenet is? Anybody? A couple. Okay, MadeSafe is a lot like Freenet, except the difference between MadeSafe and Freenet is one has an incentivization system. It incentivizes you to work within it through its built-in cryptocurrency called SafeCoin, obviously from the name MadeSafe. MadeSafe it's software you would install on your computer, and once you install it on the computer, you give it so much hard drive, you give it so much CPU usage, you give it resources, okay? And then you get access, and it creates an entire other internet. But the beauty about this internet is it does not run on servers. It runs on everybody's computer that has it on there. Okay, and what's that?
So it's like BitTorrent. It's like sharing a file.
It's kind of like BitTorrent, but here's the beauty of it, is that not all the data that ever gets put up is ever in one place.
Right.
As to where BitTorrent, part of the problem is, and where like legal issues occur, people can
Seeding.
Yeah, seeding. They know who's got it. Yeah, you've got the whole movie. That's where you put a movie into MadeSafe. That movie's everywhere, but you can access it just as fast as if it was in one place.
So it's like Usenet in a way, but it's actually like centralizing it with like some sort of crypto.
Yeah, it's kind of like Usenet. Usenet's pretty basic software that actually I wish people still used. But that's another. Getting onto Usenet costs way too much. Usenet is sort of an email alternative to some degree, and it's actually really popular for downloading files. It's an alternative to torrenting. But Usenet, you have to pay into companies now. It used to be free in the 90s. It just came with your ISP service. But that's no longer the case. So I don't usually talk about Usenet just because of that. That doesn't mean it's not useful. It's very useful. So MadeSafe is this decentralized, no server internet, connects everybody everywhere around the world. It's really amazing. It does not exist yet. It's not out there, but it's coming. Okay, it is on its way. They are funded. They did a pre-sale for the SafeCoin that I mentioned. Okay, and so it does exist. So MadeSafe is something I definitely recommend looking into, especially if you are a miner for cryptocurrencies and suddenly your computers are worth really running to mine cryptocurrencies, because you can become a farmer, kind of like you have server farms. okay? That's what like we talked about earlier, those central points of failure. Well, with MadeSafe, you become a farmer, and so you're actually, kind of working it, and you get safe coins in return. So you're incentivized to have this internet run, and it has nothing to do with the government, because unfortunately, whether I like it or not, the government did invent the internet as we know it. That doesn't make it a bad thing in and of itself, but that's a fact. I know there's a lot of libertarians that want to say, oh, no, we created the internet. We certainly brought it to where it is, but we didn't come up with that technology. What's that? Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I think banks actually really made it what it is.
Porn.
Yeah. Porn. Yeah, porn makes that. Actually, great point about porn. I'm going to open this up to questions, what people want to do. Because my whole key, though, is just I want people to start thinking a little more locally and just having all of these all these technologies that we have enhance your life and not become the primary aspect of your interactions and your business and what you do. Okay, that's my main key. But with porn, porn actually has continually, or sex I should say, has continually driven science and technology forward since the beginning of time. There's no doubt about it, whether it was the first male that needed a bigger cave to fit all of his sexual partners, be that men and women. That was what is it, the mother of invention is necessity, right? So Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, honestly, and I think just about everything is, its end game goal is to have sex. But that's genetic determinism in science, so I'm not even going to get into that. Let's do questions. How about that?